What's your worst story of? Throw him in the pool, he'll learn how to swim, parenting style. 2 days after graduating high school, I came home to an empty house. All my stuff in a U-Haul because my mom and stepdad moved without me. I've been financially independent ever since, but a heads up would have been nice. Well, hey, you're 18 now, welcome to the real world. My stepdad would get hammered to make me drive him home. I was 14 and couldn't drive stick, and he was like, you'll figure it out. This happened maybe 3 times. Well, see, the nice thing about whenever you're a designated driver is that you're usually driving at a really odd hour where you're the only person on the road. So even if you are underage or don't know how to drive the car, or let's just say the road is super icy, it's not super likely that you're going to hit somebody. This actual thing. I was a lifeguard as a high schooler. Some parent did this to their 5-year-old. Parents thought the kid was fine because he wasn't splashing around. He was bobbling up and down with his arms going straight up and straight out. This actually means they're drowning. I had to jump in and grab the kid, who had swallowed significant amounts of water, and call an ambulance to check the kid out. The parents didn't want us to call the ambulance, but we told them it was the ambulance or the police, because what he did could be considered child endangerment. Dad was losing it, screaming at me, a 17-year-old girl. The owner of the pool saw this, and he got up in the guy's face. The parent was banned from the pool for life. To this day, I'm convinced the guy was completely hammered. Yeah, if you're gonna throw your kid into a pool to learn how to swim, make sure it's not that deep. When I was around 11 or 12, 2 kids from the neighborhood got into a street fight. Kid number 1 clearly got the best of kid number 2, and number 2 was crying and went home. Should have been the end of the story. Well, kid number 2's parents met him at his front door and sent him back out there to continue the fight. I'm not sure if it was about honor or what, but it was painful to watch. Geez, did he come from a Spartan family? They didn't want to teach me to tie my shoes, because my mom said, I had to learn that myself, so should you. You know, funny story related that. One day when I was maybe like 15, I just forgot how to tie my shoes one day. Like, I just could not remember how to do it. So I had to come up with some weird other way of doing it, which was not technically correct, but it worked out for a while. Then a few years later, it just came back to me and I remembered the correct way to do it again. Just walk it off. My dad, when I developed a big nasty cyst on my toe when my mom was away on a stressful trip. She was not pleased to come back and have to immediately drive me to the hospital. It got to the point where I took one step on it and almost passed out. He apologized afterwards, got a sandwich from a really good sandwich place, and I forgave him. Now I laugh about it. Well maybe his dad was meaning like just walk it off, like just walk until your foot falls off. I was always a picky eater growing up. One time my mom sat me down with a small bowl of almonds and told me I couldn't get up out of my seat until I finished it. I insisted that I hated them and they were making my mouth itch. She thought I was just being difficult. I just started to swallow the almonds like pills because my mouth was so itchy from chewing on them. A couple years later, I saw an allergist and discovered I was allergic to tree nuts. You know, the story would have a whole different vibe to it if it comes out that the mom actually knew he had the allergy. 7 years old, had an asthma attack at our camp in the middle of the night. At that time, treatment for an attack was a nebulizer machine that would require electricity, which we didn't have at our camp. My parents kept telling me that I just had to calm down and breathe better so the attack would go away on its own. They only intervened hours later because I couldn't sleep because of all the noise I was making as I choked and gasped for air. We drove 3 hours back to our house, passing multiple hospitals along the way because they were embarrassed that I was in such bad shape, and blamed me for not just breathing properly. Fun times. Is there a line somewhere where it goes from being an incompetent parent to a malicious parent? Because they are very close to the line wherever that is. My younger cousin, 4 at the time, was a climber and always needed help getting down. His dad told his mom to leave him. He'll either learn to get down himself or stop climbing. The cousin ended up climbing onto the roof, fell off and got impaled on a fence pole. One very expensive trip to the ER and he now has a cool scar on his thigh. Wow, this 4-year-old made it all the way to the roof by themselves? Maybe they can be the next reboot of Spider-Man. My older sister taught me how to ride a bicycle by putting me on the seat of a full-sized bike at the top of our downward sloping driveway and giving me a good push, sending me flying down the driveway and jettisoning me into the street. I got the hang of it pretty quickly. I mean, that's kind of how I learned to snowboard. The way I always put it is like, I didn't learn to stop on a snowboard until my 3rd day. My dad bought a new house after my parents divorced. Behind us were 2 kids close in age with me that used to mess with me every time I visited. One day they hopped my dad's fence, pushed me down and stole my basketball. When I told my dad, he decided to go talk to their parents to get my ball back. Oh wait, that's what normal dads would do. My dad, a former pro boxer, made me fist fight both of them one at a time and earn my basketball back. You know, I'd kind of like to see him organize that fight together. Does he just knock on their door and say, alright neighbor kids, come over into this ring real quick? My dad wanted to teach me how to sail when I was 11. I was terrified of the ocean, but I wanted to spend the day with him, so it didn't matter much to me. I was on a sailboat, waiting for him to join me, when I suddenly felt the boat drifting away from shore. He had untied the boat and was pushing it out into the sea. I was alone, not knowing how to sail, and completely panicked. It was getting dark by the time I returned home. The worst part was being stranded in the ocean. It was my disappointment. I really thought my father and I would have fun together, but nope. Well, you made it back to shore, so it sounds like you figured it out. At least you didn't end up on another coast on the other side of the ocean. I hurt my arm playing football during morning break at school. I was sent home by the school nurse. My dad said it was fine, bandaged it, and sent me to school the next day, only for them to send me home again within an hour. My mom made my dad take me to the hospital, and my arm was broken. My wrist was split lengthwise. It was in casts for 9 months. I was secretly buzzing, to be honest, because, well, that showed him the knob. It does seem like there's always a constant battle between kids who fake conditions and parents who might or might not believe those conditions. So who is really worse, the kid that's faking something, or a parent who doesn't believe when it's a real thing? My parents telling me my whole life that they would pay for my university. And then when I actually moved out and started university, they said, "Never mind, figure it out on your own." That's okay. College isn't that expensive anymore, right? When I was about 5 or 6, I was very sick with a flu. Fever, vomiting, sweating, congestion. It was awful. There was some mix-up at the pharmacy, and they thought I was my father, and gave him adult medication, basically 3 giant horse pills. Now, normal child medication for things like this are syrups and chewable stuff for obvious reasons. My dad comes home and tells me I have to take these meds. I have a hard time getting them down, almost choking a few times. My dad got frustrated and literally started shoving these huge pills down my sore throat with his angrily shaking fingers. I started crying. My nose was stuffed so I could only breathe through my mouth. I remember my dad's wedding ring banging against my teeth, eyes watering, gasping for air while looking at my mom for help. Eventually I coughed it back up, crying and throat on fire. I remember my mom demanding an apology from my dad, who just said, "Well, he's gonna have to learn to take pills like that sometime anyway," and stormed off. Dang, I haven't thought about that story in 20 plus years. Well, have you gotten any better at swallowing pills, or are you now terrified of them? I was volunteering at a parent-child zoo day, and saw a few parents like this. The zoo had some free roaming peacocks, and it was awful how many parents just didn't tell their too-young-to-know kids that they can be mean. So the little toddler goes, "Wow, pretty bird," and tries to get a closer look, only to get chased and attacked by this thing while the parents watch. Most of them said something like, "You should have known better." Like, how if you never teach them? The child can barely walk. You expect them to remember that some animals have a strong territorial sense, and then your baby gets terrorized by this thing that's bigger than them and looks like an alien for all they know, and you don't even give them a hug? See also, that one mom we had to kick out of the zoo because she was encouraging her kids to antagonize the llama in the hopes that it would spit on them. Yikes, people. Have some empathy for tiny humans who trust you implicitly with their well-being. Yeah, actually the theme park I go to all summer has a lot of peacocks that just wander around. And I always think it's kind of weird, because I'm like, how do these dozen birds handle just huge crowds of people walking around all the time? My brother and I are 7 years apart. When he was 16 and I was 9, he taught me how to box by putting a hockey helmet on me and beating the ever-loving crap out of me. I'm reasonably certain I was concussed, and I suffered horrible migraines from that day well into my 20s. Okay, I've wondered this for a long time. Does taking a beating actually make you tougher? I mean, I guess it's kind of like getting calluses on your fingers from playing guitar. That's kind of beating up your fingers and toughening them up that way. So, does it work the same from just taking punches? I don't know if this counts, but stop crying or I'll give you a reason to cry. Something my dad used to say to me. It would send me into panic. I was upset and didn't know how to stop crying, and then hearing that would make it worse because now I'm crying because my dad was mad at me, and if I didn't stop crying, he was going to make me cry even more. Well, he sounds like a very nice dad. Some bigger kid beat me up a little when I was a kid. After complaining to my dad, he said that I'd have to sort it out on my own. So I got something like a 2x4 plank, found the kid, and whacked him on the head with it. Then his parents complained. Actually, it kind of worked. The kids who don't fight back get bullied. The ones who are nuts are left alone. Yeah, as much as bullies like to act like they're so tough, they're really only gonna pick easy fights. They almost never go after anybody that they might actually lose to. This kind of counts. I was a kid who always zoned out or stared into space, which resulted in a lot of adults, including teachers and my parents, thinking I was deliberately ignoring them. They tried everything. It's like I wouldn't even hear them when they yelled. Then I acted like I didn't even know what they were yelling at me for. Like, what a little a-hole, right? I was such a little idiot. I'd stop mid-sentence, zone out for sometimes even up to or past a minute, and then pick up my sentence right where I left off. Sometimes I would stop walking for no reason. It could take me upwards of hours to finish a page of math homework. I was so slow that what took classmates 5 minutes to do could take me all of a lesson. My mom would tell me things, only for me to later insist that she never said that. She would call for me, and I wouldn't answer, until she had to yell. at which point I would turn around and insist she didn't have to shout. In the end, it was always the same. A teacher would decide that if I didn't want to give them respect, I could just do things alone. I should have listened to them when they were explaining things if I was really interested in learning, right? So they stopped helping me when I didn't understand something they had already said, because I should have been listening in the first place. Surely this would get the message across, right? After all, this bratty little kid had to learn his lesson. Well, as a result of stress, I had a grand mal seizure. I was taken to the hospital, where I was diagnosed with absence epilepsy, a form of epilepsy that doesn't have the tremors associated with typical seizures. A person having an absence seizure simply stares, having a completely still seizure with their eyes open. As a result of this, it often looks like someone is simply staring out into space, unresponsive, or ignoring you, when they may actually be having a medical emergency. So during times when I would be ignoring a teacher, I was actually having an absence seizure. Suddenly they would be yelling at me, and I honestly didn't know why. Now I have to pay for seizure medication and therapy. Oh well, that was a lot of fun just reading about a bunch of child abuse. I did cut out a few of the bit more hardcore ones, but it's always interesting to see just all the different kinds of stories we find on this channel. Speaking of crazy little stories, so a few days ago we got this huge snowstorm, and I didn't really bother shoveling out my whole driveway. And my driveway is kind of on a slope, and so I have to like pull my car into my spot. But it's like, when the snow fell, it landed on my car, so underneath was dry, so I felt like, as long as I can get the car into the spot, that's fine. Well, yesterday I was like trying to drive into my spot, but slipping on the ice and kept sliding back down, but I finally like got a running start and got into my spot. Well, then I wake up this morning and I look outside and my car is gone. And turns out it had slid down the ice, just like down to the end of the driveway. Luckily it didn't make its way all the way into the road, but I had freaked out and had to go bash up a bunch of ice just to get my car back. But anyway, wow, we're only gonna have one more video before Christmas. So yeah, I guess I don't think I have any Christmas related videos planned, but yeah, that's all for today.